Hi guys, I'm just here to give you your midweek thought. I don't feel very qualified to do this, but hopefully it will just help at least one person and just bless them in what I've got to say. I was thinking about what to say for this thought. There's been so many good thoughts that I've listened to and been really blessed by, and I just thought, what can I add? And I didn't get a really strong, clear answer, but just conversations with people, listening to certain parts of the Bible, and just things that have been sort of flowing have sort of come together. And I came up with this idea of how do we live with contentment in our lives and being content with what we have. And this idea sort of came from talking to people about what it's going to look like when we come out of lockdown. Are we just going to go back to the busyness and the craziness of life, or are we going to be able to have a different perspective on what's important and what's going to be our priority for the future? And when I think of the word contentment, I think of my two grandmas, and they were left alone when my granddads died. And sometimes you go and visit them and you'd think, oh, their life must be quite boring, maybe a bit bleak at times. But you'd ask them how they are and they would say, yes, I'm fine, I'm good. And you genuinely knew that they meant that. And that's because they had such a strong relationship with Jesus. They didn't want for anything. They didn't need possessions in their lives. They cared about family. They cared about others. And ultimately they knew and were assured in Jesus. And there's this passage from a book that I shared on Facebook last year, and it came up in my memories this week. And I just thought that's so key for what the world looks for, and then what we're trying to look for as Christians. It's called The World. And it says, the world is increasingly designed to depress us. Happiness isn't very good for the economy. If we were happy with what we had, why would we need more? How do you sell an anti-aging moisturiser? You make someone worry about ageing. How do you get people to vote for a political party? You make them worry about immigration. How do you get them to buy insurance? By making them worry about everything. How do you get them to have plastic surgery? By highlighting their physical flaws. How do you get them to watch a TV show? By making them worry about missing out. How do you get them to buy a new smartphone? By making them feel like they are being left behind. To be calm becomes a kind of revolutionary act. To be happy with your own non-upgraded existence, to be comfortable with our messy human selves, would not be good for business. And when my grandma's died, I prayed to God that I would feel some contentment like they have in their lives, and that I would be content with the things that I have. And I don't think that continuously means we have to be happy, clappy Christians all the time. I think it's more than that. It's an inner joy and peace, and like it said in that passage, a calm that isn't very worldly in that sense. And I think that makes us stand out a bit more as well. And I think people will see that in our lives. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I get into the sort of attitude of, oh, it'd be great to have this, then I'll be happy. It'd be great to have this job, and then I'd be happy. If only I could have reached that goal, then I'll be happy, or have that thing, I'll be happy. And I think we all know that we've come across those times in our lives, and those things haven't made us joyful, I should say, or content with the things that we have. Paul and I sometimes moan because we don't have a parking space at our house, and we don't have a very big garden, and we sometimes moan, oh, it'd be so good to have these things. But every time I begin to moan, I think back to when my parents took us to Brazil. I was 11 years old and my sister was 14, and we had by no means we weren't rich or anything, but we had plenty, and we went out to these slums and we saw people living in a dire situation. As an 11-year-old child, that really hit me, and I've never been able to forget that. And those people were content in Jesus. When they met with Jesus, they were content with the situation they were given, and they didn't want for more. And that just really spoke to me, how we can find our contentment in Jesus. And I've got a passage from Luke 12, which is the parable that Jesus taught. It's called the parable of the rich fool. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain, and I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God." And I think it's not wrong, it's not bad to have luxuries and to have money. I think it's where if we put all of our value in that, that's where we sort of don't feel that contentment in life. And this passage reminds me of what my granddad used to say. He would always call himself a millionaire, say, "I'm a millionaire." And once, I remember I was quite young, I said, "What do you mean, Granddad?" And he said, "Because I've got all you lot." And my granddad grew up as an only child with a mother who was quite stern and very cruel at times. And he met my grandma, and they got married and had 4 children, and then their 4 children had us, and lots of cousins. And he used to call himself a millionaire because he was surrounded and felt blessed by the family that God had given him. And I always think about that when maybe you have tough days with your family, or life seems a bit tough, and you've got to remember the blessings that we are surrounded with. And I think as we have spent time in more of a simple life through this whole process of lockdown, I hope and pray that our perspective on life changes. And it's something that I'm being taught, and I hope and pray that you can find true contentment in your future outside of this lockdown, whatever that might look like for you. I think Jesus mentions this quite a few times about serving other people and not just looking for ourselves. And I don't know if you've heard this phrase that's sort of going around that says at the moment you need to think about yourself, and it doesn't sit right with me. And I think it's important to care about ourselves, but it doesn't quite sit right with me, because we need to look how we can help others. We need to support other people and serve other people, and that will also bring contentment, because we're living a life that Jesus has taught us to live through service. There's a passage in Philippians that Paul wrote, and as we know, Paul went through quite a lot of hardships in his life, and we're looking at Philippians in the services on Sunday, and so we'll come across this. This is Philippians 4:12-13. "I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want." And this is his secret that he speaks about. "I can do all this through him who gives me strength." And never has a verse been so poignant to me over these last 9 weeks now, because we've been living without Paul, and it's been strange and a bit disconcerting and a bit sad at times. And I've just been riding on that strength that God has given me through prayers of other people, and feeling that contentment through the situation that we find ourselves in. And I hope and pray that you find that strength in God, and that through this time and whatever situation you are going to be facing coming out of lockdown, just remember that God is for you. He wants to give you his strength, and he wants you to feel content in life, and not thinking materialistically about that, but looking at the things in our lives that are important. So I hope that has maybe blessed one person, spoken to somebody, maybe helped somebody, put something in place that they've been speaking about this week. And we hope we can see you again at the Sunday services. That would be great. And I hope and pray that you have an amazing week this week. God bless, and goodbye.